Mary, thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me.
How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well.
We haven't talked in a bit. The last time I saw you was at your show at Morgan Lehman
Yeah, that's
last
right.
spring, maybe?
Oh, I think it was longer than that. I
Longer
think
than
it's
that?
been a couple
Has
years.
it? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, but we met initially at your Ortega y Gasset show
that's
in
right.
South
Yeah, that's
Brooklyn.
right. And then
Yeah.
I came by your studio.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was so much fun. That was a great show. And then
it
we
was
trade.
great.
Yeah,
We
and then
did. Yeah.
yeah, we had a trade. So how often do you come to New York?
I mean it really fluctuates. I haven't I there was a time where I was able to go like 2 to 3 times a year or so. But it kind of depends on work and if I've got stuff going on or but it's been a while. I think the last time I was there was last June over the last summer.
So a few times a year if you can.
Yeah.
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 And you're
As much as possible, I love that city.
oh yeah, it's the
Yeah.
best. It's truly the best. So did you ever live here full time?
I did not know. I've never lived, I've largely lived kind of off center of the art world or art centers, I guess. I grew up in the Chicago area, and so I had a lot of access to that city growing up.
Where'd you grow up?
Northwest suburbs of Chicago. I'll just say that. It's probably the for your listeners. That'll get us
The
there.
easy.
Yeah.
Close enough, a suburb.
But
Yeah.
it was a beautiful, I mean, I lived really close to a train line. My earliest memories of freedom and autonomy was getting on the train and going to Chicago and, taking classes at the Art Institute and seeing museums and yeah, so it was a really great kind of early education in looking at art.
Well, the Art Institute is just a fantastic museum.
It
You know,
is, yes.
they have a bit of everything.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. My mother actually, she went to the Art Institute of Chicago in the 60s for fashion design. And I recently actually had my assistant go through, I had collected, when I was cleaning out my parents' house, I found all of her artwork from that time, from the 60s. And so it's cool. We just went through and kind of packaged it all to be a bit more archival. And it was a really fun, I guess, time capsule to go through.
Oh, wow, cool. So she was also making like paintings and drawings and things like
Yeah,
that.
she
Yeah.
did like performance painting, like figure painting, like painting on models, drawing. But her real kind of focus was in fashion design and textiles.
That's so cool. And I
Yeah.
feel like I see that come up in your work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I mean, it's not something that one as an artist really, as you're learning about it and starting to kind of dip your toes in making things, it's not something that you're necessarily privy to at the time. But yeah, so my mother had this background in fashion design and then spent her career as a freelance stylist for fashion photography. And so I mean, I would go to her work, and my father was a photographer as well. So I would go to their studios and just watch them work. And she would spend hours kind of meticulously folding garments, steaming them, ironing them, and then really beautifully, carefully, like sculpting shadows with light, which is just wild to think when I think about my paintings and how just invested I am in that idea of shaping light
So you really
on a
absorbed
flat
that.
surface. Yeah, but it's like it took, I mean, I think I'm only now realizing how informative that was for me at the time.
You can't know at the time.
No, there's no way to know. And that's what makes it really beautiful. Like, you don't want to know too much as you're doing it.
That's right. There has to be the mystery.
Yeah.
And you're subtly picking up on all this stuff.
Yeah, knowing where one's roots are, how we're conditioned, but then also continually trying to kind of question and antagonize it, which is a big part of the work. I mean, the work has this appearance of being, I mean, it's meticulously crafted. The surfaces, there's a lot of straight edge painting, but there's a lot of work done through the application of paint to create a kind of breath or airiness or atmosphere that is much warmer, I hope, than what one would assume, like at first sight. So the studio there really is this constant kind of push and pull between this kind of tightness, this clarity of mark and edge and color, but then also really trying to create a space that feels like one can float in. Something that's really defied by or something that really defies the flatness of the surface of a painting, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I like the way you put that, but it seems like it's a tightness and a looseness. You're careful not to go too far either way, too tight or too loose, and you want to keep it open. And I do feel like it successfully does that because there's a lot of painterly stuff, but it's still hard edged, as you say. But there's a softness, so I think it feels like it really like resides in this really beautifully in this liminal space.
Yeah, and I think to go back to this idea of the rebellion or that kind of pushing back against one's, I don't know, instincts or tendencies or ways of being, it's like finding that space is not this intended, target that it's not like such a clear process or pragmatic kind of step by step way of working. It's kind of like I find it through this kind of swaying back and forth between the two and kind of in questioning each painting and not really feeling like I actually have my feet on the ground in terms of knowing what I want from a painting at in every moment. And so there's just it's a lot it's very much a conversation. I'm sure you haven't, a lot of artists will talk about their work in this way. It's a kind of the work talks back to you. And part of the job is we're asserting ourselves, but we also, to some degree, have to let go of that and listen to the thing because the thing becomes outside of ourselves in some ways, out of
So
our control.
you might have an idea in your mind that you're not afraid to deviate depending on what the painting sort of needs.
Yeah, I think yeah, or what it wants to be, or not even what it needs. Sometimes I think um, the process of discovering something isn't always about perfection. And I think that is something that I struggle with regularly. And the struggle is good. The struggle is not, it doesn't always feel good, but the struggle is like intrinsic to working progressively, in my opinion.
Maybe you could walk us through the process from start to finish of making a painting.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, oh, that's a good question. Um, you're familiar with my work. I work from a lot of imagery. Like this last year, I've been working on building a visual archive of all of the different reference materials that I used. And it's a physical archive, so everything's printed out, everything's cited. But then I also have this digital version of it too. And so a lot of this kind of studying of imagery is a big part of how I work. I make drawings, I make kind of doodle-like drawings. I make some like quasi-planny drawings, but not really. I actually, when I'm drawing in service of a painting, I try to, I can't, I really have to I have to resist solving too much in a drawing. Otherwise, it will never be a step forward for the painting. And so there's a little bit of drawing just to kind of like visualize ideas to get them kind of out of my head. But then once I paint, it's every move kind of creates this new space that I have to assess. So it's very much an intuitive practice. Like I think one of the questions people often ask me is like, oh, do you plan all of this? And I really don't. I'll make a move, and that I'll premeditate, to a certain degree. I'll have a hunch about something. I'll make a move, and then I have to kind of start from ground zero again and relook at the painting as if I haven't seen it before. At least that's the ideal. Um, and so the work, if you've seen it in person, there's a physicality to the work because the way that I build imagery happens through this kind of addition of information, but then a removal. So a kind of erasure that's sometimes it has to be done through like really resanding something down. But a lot of the times there's this kind of just like erasure through the addition of additional kind of shapes or layers
And so
to paint things
it's
out.
acrylic and you're painting on top perhaps sometimes or
Mhm.
sanding off sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, but there's a lot of evidence of previous moves. And so there's this kind of sense of there's skin on skin and there's a kind of information buried underneath. So sometimes there will be these tactile textural things that happen that are just evidence of some kind of earlier image. And I like to play with that. And I sand things down when I don't want that visible. But I really like to think about painting as this three-dimensional thing, right? And the objectness of the painting. That's why I always come back to working on panel. Like I love that the painting is absorbed into it. If I drop a canvas painting, you know, and bust a corner, I could maybe like restretch it, right? But with the panel painting, like it's all like the image is in the body of the thing. And I like that there's really this continuity between the image, the picture, any kind of illusion that happens in that realm, and then also the substrate that it's on, and the corners and the cradle and the back, the edges, all of that is just a single body, and I like that continuity.
Sounds like a sculpture, really.
Yeah, I think, I
I
mean,
think
I
you
think
mentioned that,
that
right?
way. Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, I think about it three-dimensionally. I'm really interested in that. Um, I don't know if this is the right word, but I'm going to use it, that kind of antagonistic relationship between an image and the thing that it's on and the object and the world of pictures and then the world of our physical bodies, right?
Oh man, I could talk to you for hours about image versus object. An object is something that is alive, an image is something that really isn't. You know, an image you see online, it's flat, you don't actually get the essence of it. But an object, and that's a whole, like looking at a painting is an object. If you see it in person, it's a whole different thing from an image. But I really get a sense that you're really playing with the objectness in your work of a
Hmm.
painting.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm really interested philosophically in terms of what that means. I was just doing a little bit of writing. I've been reading this some of the writings of Richard Archwager, and he said something like that he wants to make paintings, or he wanted to make a painting that had handles on it, like the sense of like where to stand, where to grab it. There's this kind of directed um there's a direction in terms of where it should be viewed, which is really different from a sculpture in the round, right? Which is also the idea behind perspective theory, right? There's this theoretical station point, right? So it's a fixed spot, and there's a lot of different ways that we could kind of create metaphors from that. But I'm kind of interested in the way that the fixed perspective of an image um, it directs the viewer to see from a certain vantage point. And I like thinking about that in terms of empathy, and in terms of like through the loss of autonomy of a viewer a little bit, you actually are forced to see something um, in a way that you ordinarily wouldn't. And I was thinking about it in relationship to fiction, like reading a story, right? Reading is one of the most powerful ways in which we can produce and practice empathy, and the way that we can kind of enter worlds and enter stories and enter subjectivities in ways that are very much directed. And so I mean, I'm a little bit hesitant to even go too far into talking about it because I just wrote, I like scribbled it in my sketchbook the other day. So it's a new thing I've been contemplating. Whereas like in the past, I often have thought about, perspective as being this actually really kind of colonial thing, right? Like that there is one way to see something, right? That the idea, when you look at a perspective drawing, it's the idea that there's one ideal station point versus multiple. So that's just me getting into the weeds about some of my kind of like ideas about how image, object, form, all of that becomes really rich in metaphor for how we can add um, content to the work, I guess.
Let's get into the weeds. Let's do it. I think
Yeah, yeah,
I think that's good. That's really
yeah.
good. I love the way you talk about perspective in that way, and that it's an sort of an empathetic device of bringing somebody into the painting. I've been thinking about perspective in the way that it's been used in like late medieval paintings or
Hmm.
pre-Renaissance,
Hmm.
maybe early Renaissance paintings versus later Renaissance paintings, and it seems like it was a much more fluid thing. Do you think it's something that became colonial at some point?
Well, when I think about those paintings, when I think about that, the colonial comment is specifically about the idea of linear perspective as this kind of calculation, right? That was Renaissance, right? When you think about those early medieval paintings, like that's pre-linear perspective. So there is this more kind of attention to, or um, to potential multiple points in time being described, or, a piece of architecture that is really responding to the edges of a painting. Um, so going back to Chicago, like there's a group of paintings that I revisited. They were these really strange, like 13 by 26 inch, just strange format, series of paintings by Giovanni di Paolo. I think it was Saint John the Baptist, some story of the Saint John the Baptist. But all of the architecture, it bends and it warps and it seems to be bending and responding to the very edges of the painting. So there's this kind of internal awareness that the painting has of its objectness, of its frame, right? Versus the linear perspective, uh, in which linear perspective is, assumes that it kind of continues on forever,
Right. Right.
infinitely, right? Or kind of not even that, but that the edges in the frame are banal. Right. Or that they are, yeah, they don't have a kind of voice. And it's something that is such a big part of my work is thinking about the voice of the edges in the frame and that demarcation between the world and space of the dream space of a painting and where it falls off.
I love that. It seems like you're
Yeah.
talking about objective perspective versus subjective perspective in a
Yeah,
sense.
sure.
And
Yeah.
I think that's one reason why I really respond to your paintings is that it has its own perspective. It's flat, but it's dimensional, and that really opens
Mhm.
it up. You're not stuck in, okay, it has to be this, like this is the view, this is the perspective, it's stuck in this. You can really pack a lot of structure into a small place. You look at like a Van Eyck or something, there's just so much visual information. Any kind of perspective is possible in that space. There's a lot of paths I think we could go from here, but I'm curious if you think about narrative in your work.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't. That's not something that's not a word that I use, that I have used. Do you have ideas about that?
Well, I've been fascinated with the way that the idea of the narrative has shifted through history. Specifically, once you're into the Renaissance, they kind of drop a lot of the biblical narratives and a lot of the religious narratives, and then it becomes almost about the workings, the material, the mechanics of the paintings. That's like the new narrative. I mean, it doesn't have to be something that you could spell it out like a story. I wonder, just in terms of like the imagery in your work, where does it come
Hmm.
from?
Yeah, so I like again from this visual archive. So I work with like images and objects and artifacts from Korea from various time periods. I am looking a lot at museum collections, and so I'm interested in that context or that framework of how we define those objects and their meaning. And so, in terms of narrative, maybe my answer is that I don't. It's not about narrative in a sense that I really do think about the simultaneity of painting, um, and not something that has a clear past, present, and future. If we were to define narrative in that way. Um, but I do like to think about painting as time-based. And so there is a connection there in terms of the way that we change as subjects in relationship to a painting and the way that we change as subjects as the world changes and the way we see history changes. And so there is a kind of fluidity there that I'm interested in. Um, so yeah, the imagery that I'm looking at are a lot of kind of objects, things that you would go see in a national museum. The last year or two, I've been focused more on folk objects and folk art, kind of pre-Korean War objects. Um, and so, this kind of gets muddied with, my kind of understanding of Korea's contemporary political history and how, I'm kind of interested in that. And so more recently, I'm also looking at actually photographs that are more wartime and post-war Korea, and thinking about the photograph as an object. That's a whole other can of worms. But yeah, so I'm looking at textiles and patterns and things on architecture, kind of traditional costume, clothing. Um, and it really started in 2019. I went back to Korea for a 6 week, I guess, research trip-ish, and just studied a lot of objects. I was able to work in the National Museum of Korea, and it was a private viewing for scholars where I was able to go in and they could pull objects out from their archives, and I was able to basically sit with them without glass. They gave me gloves. I was able to hold these, um, like hold and carry and touch and smell and get very close to these things. And so that was a really, really formative experience for me in terms of being able to really access them in that kind of intimate way and to meditate on them as objects that were originally lived with, you know, versus used and fragmented and contextualized or by an institution in order to tell a kind of a political or I'm sorry, a national narrative, a national story. And so that's a lot of the stuff I'm digging through right now. But I work the images that I work with. I also work very I'm very like promiscuous. I'm not thinking that there's a categorization of the work of how I work with the images, but I try to stay really open and be intuitive in the things that I'm attracted to and the things that I decide to go to in paintings, and it's not a very clear process.
So you might start with an image, drawing, or a photograph of an object that you've encountered in Korea.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, and since then, I was back there in 20 last spring as well, and so I was able to collect a lot of my own documentation. Like I take my own photographs, but I'm also working from digital archives, book scans. Yeah, and it's interesting because it's not like I think what you're getting at maybe is a little bit more about like walk us through your process. I think that it's much more of a kind of living, breathing not clear process in terms of how the imagery makes its way into the work. I think the act of looking, the studying is a creative endeavor. So it's not like I do this and then this happens. It's that being immersed and having one's head in a book just creates opportunity. It changes the way that I see the world, changes the way that I think about images, not in a way that I can always articulate or explain. And so just looking through books, looking at things, visiting objects, writing about ideas, it just then I go to the studio and then something happens, right? And things happen. I mean, sometimes I'm in the middle of a painting and I'll just, I'm in a stuck point or something, and I'll just start looking at stuff. It's as a way to open up my feelers so that I can then move forward in a work. And that does happen through a process of citation. I like to think about the way that I build imagery in relationship to writing. And so the words like paraphrase or citation or quotation um, happens in my work. Like I'd like to draw parallels between that. Like sometimes I really will shift and change something and that I borrow or that I look at. And then sometimes it's a real clear, like I'm making like a fragment of a copy painting or something. And so there's a real range in terms of how the imagery gets processed once it enters the work. Um, but at the same time, there's so much of what we do as humans that cause something in a work to happen that is not always visible, right? Sometimes, if I start with a painting, an image that I take from something, even if I were to end up painting over the entire thing and starting quote unquote over, right? That the ghost of the thing is still there, that energy is still there. And I still think of that underpainting, not as something that was erased, but something that is a kind of, it's the architecture of the thing. And there's a spirit to it that continues to vocalize itself. And so when I spend a day, if I spend 20 minutes applying paint, but then the rest of the day looking at things, that's still, I still feel like I'm in it in some ways. I'm kind of moving forward.
That could be more productive than painting. It often is, right?
Yeah.
I love how open you are with the process and that I'm sort of attempting to get a sort of linear and more rigid, like, oh, you do this and this and this and this, but it seems like it's not really that clear and that you have a real openness to how you approach the whole process of painting.
Yeah, and sometimes I mean, just to demystify a little bit, sometimes it's just super dumb. Sometimes it's like, and it's like there's no reasoning. Sometimes it's like I have sometimes it's that I have a real aversion to something that I paint. I'm like, ugh, like, and I just like I'm reacting to things. Sometimes it's that I have a little bit more uh I feel like I have a little bit more energy to allow the things that I'm averse to sit and breathe and to so it's really about this conversation that happens. Um, you know, there's times when I find myself in the studio and I make a really easy move. And I'm like, that's your go-to move. You're doing it, and I'm like, it works, but it's not, but in order for the painting to move forward in the way that I feel in my gut it needs to, sometimes I have to completely eradicate something that I spent a lot of time on. I have kind of intermittently worked with assistants, and anyone who's worked with me before has gone through this with me, where we will develop something in a work that was extremely labor intensive, like just hard on your back, hard on your eyes. And then I'm like, okay, we gotta like sand all that out and start again. And sometimes it's to do something different, and sometimes it's to just redo the whole thing again because it's not right?
That energy is still in what you did.
Yeah.
So it's still there. There's no real wasted. And how would you know unless you went down that road and tried it, right?
hmm At least that's what I tell myself to sleep at night.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't waste 3 hours
Right,
painting
right.
that thing and then sanding it off. So you seem like very good at checking in with the process and really there's an awareness there I can sense of a real deep questioning.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I consider myself like I have a real like I'm a very internal person. I feel like there's a constant inner monologue happening. I don't maybe that's everybody feels that way. But the studio is this place where I can shut everything out and really deeply sink into something. And yeah, that feels like home base for me.
So what kind of imagery were you working with before 2019, before your trip to Korea?
Oh, imagery. Right.
And had you been to Korea before that time?
Yeah, so I was born in Korea. And 2019 was the first time going back since I left in like 1987. Um, and before that, I don't think the paintings didn't look all that much different. The things that I was looking from was less images and more things from my environment, furniture, architecture, interior spaces. Um, always shadows, always looking for those kinds of weird shadow shapes that one can find in the corner of your house or your bedroom, or, when you just, I mean, I don't know. I think for us, like my memories of being a kid, like it wasn't being on a phone. It was like staring at the ceiling, you know?
I
And
think
like,
we were so lucky we didn't grow up with smartphones, man.
yeah, yeah. And like, I think those were the kinds of things. So like I was always really excited about I don't know if you're familiar with Ellsworth Kelly's photographs, those black and white photographs, but this idea that you can find a painting anywhere. It was so funny. One of the most awesome comments I ever got in my studio was Fox Heisen told me, she's like, these are boring. And I'm like, you're right, they are totally boring and banal. Like the things that were depicted in the work were totally unexciting and not flashy and uh stoic, right? But I love this idea that if you just wherever you are, if you sit there long enough, you can find a painting somewhere.
At the time, you saw that as a good thing of making paintings that weren't flashy.
I mean, yeah, right. Saying that your work is boring could maybe like one could take it personally, but I did not at all. I found it like to be such a loving comment and so right on. I'm like, you're right. They totally are. But that's also what I think that's really what I knew about the work and I knew about myself was that there was this stillness and this quietude and a slowing down that felt really important to me. Um, I not interested in taking people on a wild ride, like I'm not a thrill seeker myself. You know what I mean? Um, yeah,
But there
so
is a real contemplative quality to your paintings, and I think that's also another thing that I was gravitating towards is this sort of stillness.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that you see that in the work because I think that's been a through line in all of the work that I've ever made.
There's a
Um,
calmness, and I think excitement is not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah. And I also think because I don't want to like I love these conversations because we can test out all kinds of different ideas. Like calm, when we think calm and quiet, like that is I am interested in the positives of that. Like I make small work. I make work that like, they're modest in size. They're not loud necessarily, but I like the idea that that's not a bad thing. That's actually that's something that one can value. But at the same time, like I think that the work, while it's calm, it's contemplative, there's also quite a lot of tension in it. There's and the tension is that a calm, a still, a quietness can also be fear, right? It can also be bracing. It can also be um, hiding or stiffness, right? So
Mm.
I want the work to be able to encompass all of those things.
They still feel charged.
Charge, yeah, absolutely. Right. Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's a kind of anticipation there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about teaching. So you've been teaching in at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville for a number of years now, right?
Yeah, so this is my eighth year,
Wow.
I think, here. Yeah.
Wow. So far
So
so good.
so far so good. It's wonderful. It's great. It's a really good gig. Yeah, I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful.
And you went to the University of Iowa, was that
I
right?
did. Mm-hmm.
So you went to grad school there. Where'd you go to undergrad?
Mm-hmm. Illinois State University,
Oh, nice.
which is
Yeah.
in Bloomington Normal, Illinois.
Ah, indeed.
Great, really great program.
I've heard good things.
Yeah.
I similarly went to undergrad and grad school in the Midwest.
Okay, where is
Um,
that?
I went to
We've
Indiana
talked
Years.
about this.
I think we talked about, yeah, I went to
Yeah.
Indiana for undergrad and then
Okay.
Champaign-Urbana in Illinois
Oh yeah,
University.
yeah. So
Yeah.
you were right down the road.
Yeah, right there.
Cool.
Exactly.
All
That was a
right.
great, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's great. But it's interesting. I also grew up going to Chicago, and it's kind of interesting having this perspective of sort of the art world from the outside in a sense. I mean, you're still connected to it. You still are
Hmm.
aware of, you're still very much a part of the greater art world, but you're kind of looking at it. And I think it's healthy, to be honest. You can be a
Hmm.
little too close to it sometimes here.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's like is the glass half empty or full? I do. I mean, I've had a desire to, live in New York or Chicago, go somewhere that has, more activity in that regard. But um, really, since being here, and even before that, I feel less of a draw to that. I think I feel more compelled to just really sink into the studio and the places that I've lived have facilitated that in really great ways in terms of the space and the resources. But here where I'm also, it's very easy for me to get to New York from East Tennessee. And I haven't felt here at least a kind of isolation from anything. And that could also be part of the way that the world has changed. This kind of decentralizing of New York. Yeah.
I'm sure you have a lot more time and space. You have a certain kind of freedom to be able to just do what you want. And how do you find academia?
Unfortunately, we're on the record, so I have to keep my mouth shut to a certain degree. Uh, right. Let's just say it doesn't come without its problems, especially now in the world, the way that it is politically. I'm not sure how much you follow in terms of, current pressures and changes that are happening in academia. I could talk for hours. I could talk your ear off about the problems. Let me tell you that. But you're asking me another question. Teaching is wonderful. I love my students. The one of the benefits of where I'm at now is that it's a research one institution, and so a big part of my job is to be an artist and to be in my studio and to teach in that way. And so I learned so much from teaching. I'm often just talking to myself in a lot of ways in the classroom. I find my students incredibly inspiring and they come from all different walks of life. And yeah, it's been such a valuable experience to have that. And then summertime, winter break, I'm on sabbatical technically, right now. So, we get these big solid breaks throughout the year where I can just be working in the studio. And I have resources, I have support in that sense, and it's really wonderful. I have amazing colleagues here. Really, really great people to work with. Our summertime sometimes feels like grad school, like everyone's just in the studios and, it's just really wonderful. It's fun.
Oh, that's
I
awesome.
love
Well,
it.
it
Yeah.
sounds like you have a community there as well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is focused in academia, but a lot of kind of younger folks, I mean, it's really all ages are really building a community here. I think that's just so important. And it's really wonderful. We have artists in residence come through. Um,
Tell me about the program.
the artist in residence program. Yeah, so it's a really old program. It's been going on for I don't have the stats on it right now, but it's decades long program in which we bring artists to come to Knoxville for 1 semester. They teach classes, they have a studio, but they become super integrated into the community and like really come in and change lives. It's very exciting, and such a cool part of being here is that little parts of New York come to me twice a year, and that's for long extended periods of time. And I've built some really beautiful relationships with people, and um, through that, and they come and they give a lecture, and they're just it's really wonderful.
You had Esteban Cabeza de Vaca there, right?
We did,
Yeah,
yes,
he was
yes,
just on the pod. He was
yes.
the last episode on the podcast.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that. I'll have to take a listen. Hi, Esto.
Yeah.
Yeah, Esto and Heidi came together
Nice.
and they did a kind of joint.
Oh, that's so
And
cool.
that was COVID era, now that I'm remembering.
So
Yeah.
you have people come in and they teach one class per semester. They have a studio. They get a place to
Mhm.
stay.
Yeah, we've had a lot of great folks like Claire Grill. I saw when I first learned about your podcast, I was like, oh, Claire, she was the first artist in residence when I started about eight years ago or so. We had Danny Levine and Caitlin Cherry, Caitlin McBride, Dana Locke, Miriam Hosseini. There's like so many I'm missing. I miss Zahar Vox. Like it was really like a lot of really great folks that
Oh yeah,
come in,
those
and
guys
I
are
just
great.
yeah, and it's super fun.
So Claire was the first one.
Well, from when I
Well, from your
started,
time,
no, this
yeah.
has been yeah. So again, it's been like decades of like we like I'm trying to think of some of the earlier. I think like Josephine Halverson was maybe an earlier one. Yeah. So but Claire was memorable to me because it was my first year here, and I was like, wow, this is so cool.
And she has such great energy, man. I
Yeah.
imagine that was just such a treat to
Oh, it
have her
was
there.
wonderful. Yeah, and her paintings are just absolutely stunning. And
Killer.
yeah.
So good. You kind of have the best of both worlds, it sounds like to me. I mean, obviously everybody's situation is different from what people think it is. Nobody, it's never like one thing. So, we always look at people, oh, it must be so great. But it does sound like you were able to have a great studio practice. The biggest issue in New York is the space and the rent is extreme, unless you find some sort of a loophole. I've
Mm.
been really fortunate to have this live workspace, which you've seen, and
Hmm.
I think it's a rare thing. So you got to get lucky somehow and just find something that's decent because just the quality of life. So many people drop out, or just not even drop out, but just so many people can't sustain a studio practice. But it sounds like you've got a practice that's very vibrant and sustainable there.
Yeah, yeah. I also have 2 kids. So that's like not it's like a perfect it's a good place for that for having kids
How
and
old are
doing
the
stuff like
kids?
that. 5 and 9. And I'm single parenting. And I mean but they're getting to like they're just so wonderful and not I'm not gonna say easy. It's not easy, but but yeah, I have a studio in my home. I have a studio on campus. I can kind of work in both places. I have this really amazing neighborhood that feels very much like a village. And so I feel like I have a lot of support and in terms of taking care of them. And yeah, it's good.
So were you teaching? You were teaching in grad school. Did you get the gig pretty soon in grad school, or did you bounce around for a bit?
No, my I kind of like moved around quite a bit. Um and I was teaching here and there, kind of adjuncting, but really just focus keeping the studio central. I lived kind of in different places in the Midwest. My former husband was also an academic, and so we kind of moved around for his job. And yeah, I just kind of set up shop wherever we went, and kind of figured it out. And, I landed this job and it was great. I did teach for a year before this in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Um, and so that was another full-time teaching thing. But yeah, I kind of yeah, I didn't really have solid feet on the ground in terms of being anywhere, like plugged in anywhere longer term for about 5 years after grad school. Um,
And then once you landed the Knoxville job, that was the first consistent job you had.
hmm hmm
Nice. That's
Yeah.
great. That's really good. So I want to just circle back really quick before I lose this thread. I think there's something more there. You were talking about the paintings. You said that they were considered boring by you had a studio visit with Fox
Oh
Heisen.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
She was. Oh, so Fox was also an artist in
Ah,
residence,
I was
and
wondering.
the way yeah. Another thing about the program that's great is that we get all of the painting and drawing faculty here together with the artists in residence at the end of the semester and do these full a day long round of studio visits and have awesome conversations. And anyways, that happened when Fox visited the studio. It was really great to yeah hear them say that. But anyways, okay, my paintings are boring.
But
Back to that.
back to that. But I think there's something more to it. I think it's maybe in my interpretation that it's sort of anti-hierarchical. The
In terms
paintings,
of,
your whole life, like the paintings, your studio, like your studio practice, everything else in your life, everything is sort of connected.
yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, it's a constellation for sure. Um, I don't know if I actually understand your question fully.
Maybe that's not a question. Maybe it might be more of an observation, but
Okay.
I've been thinking about this a lot lately in that you can tell when somebody's not interested. Historically, you see it all the time in like Renaissance paintings. Yeah, sure, there's a little landscape in the background, whatever about that. I'll just do this
Mm,
thing. But certain kinds of paintings seem to be non-hierarchical, the approach. Everything's done with the same care.
hmm
And I see that in your work too, where there's a flattening happening, I think, because of the attention to every part of the painting.
hmm Yeah, absolutely. And the what we would consider marginal, or maybe would assume is marginal, is treated with the same kind of specificity. At least that's what I aim for. Um, which is that's I mean we are conditioned to read pictures in certain ways, like the kind of hierarchy of foreground and background has been something that I try to push and shift and invert at times, like throughout my painting since I've been making paintings, really, this attention to what we would call background or negative space or the shadows, right? The thing that is kind of quietly there, is instrumental to defining the thing that's central, right? I mean, it's the entire context of a thing defines it. And so that's really important to me, pictorially and materially, to deal with in the work.
It's like Alan Watts said, you can't have up without down. You can't
Yeah,
have dark without light.
exactly.
It's all figure and ground.
Absolutely. And it's one of the most magical things to me about being a painter and working with images is the way that things can float forward and backwards and be surprising, and um you pull back the onions and it's just the onion peels, and it's just really it's something new.
Can you talk about shadows a bit?
Yeah, so it's I guess shadows. So I guess to pick up on what I just said about that kind of the intangible being as important as the tangible. I think about that in terms of the shadow. It's this non, it's not like mass, I guess in our lives, right? In the world. But it tells us where something is oriented in relationship to something else, I mean, it's gravity, it's atmosphere.
It's light.
And it's light. Yeah, obviously, yeah, exactly. And so the shadow and painting to paint that with the same kind of body and material presence as something that, like the depiction of something that does have mass. Like that equalizing is really it's a kind of way of thinking about experience in a way. Or the unfolding of experiences. That doesn't make sense. You're gonna have to cut that out too. Um,
No, that's good. That's good. That's good. We should leave it. We're gonna leave it. We're gonna leave
yeah,
some of this stuff. Yeah.
right. Like it's so like thinking about how the world presents itself to us is surprising and becomes more full and rich when we're open to the things that we too often relegate to the margins or the background, right? Because the things that are in the background or the margins, right, we're going to ignore and we're going to overlook or we're going to just take for granted, right? And I'm interested in inverting those assumptions
That's really good.
in the painting. Yeah,
I appreciate that. It's almost like you're aware of absence or something, or aware of
absolutely.
the negative shapes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Everything is kind of emerging and then unemerging or falling away. It's this kind of continual process of things coming in and out of our awareness. And so I don't have, I wanted to end with some kind of like really profound, like, and so this means, but there is none. That's just what it is. Yeah.
I love that. That's what makes it rich and great. I think that's what
Yeah.
makes you like the real deal. I mean, you're the real deal because you think about these things deeply. Do you meditate, by the way?
I, I have had, I've had, how would I say this? I'm like a B minus
That's
meditator,
pretty good.
maybe a C plus
That's all right.
meditator.
Yeah.
I tried to meditate. Yeah. Not I can't get to it every day. I am actually something I'm doing at the end of January is I'm going on a 4-day silent meditation retreat in Tennessee. And so that is with the intention of trying to integrate it into my daily life with more intensity. Um, so yes, it's something I'm interested in. I think about, I consider every day. Meditation, yeah, sitting meditation or mindfulness in general.
I asked because the way that you talk about painting and you talk about awareness and noticing things is similar to what seems to happen in meditation. It's just awareness and noticing. It's
Mm-hmm.
nothing really mystical or woo-woo. It's just noticing, just observing sensations in your
Uh,
body. And then you realize that thoughts too are just a kind of a sensation. Buddhist cultures of the past have considered thought to be one of the senses. And you
interesting. Yeah.
don't attach to your sense of smell or sight, or
Right.
hearing, whatever it is. It's just another
Uh-huh.
sense. Thoughts come and go, just like
hmm
objects in your awareness come and go.
Right. Yeah, and when we over-identify with our thoughts or we become too enwrapped or by their intensity or the intensity of feeling, um, then we make bad decisions. Do you know what I mean? Like we make judgments. When we become overly fixated on something and you're not looking at all of the intricacies of experience, then, people start wars. You know, I mean, like
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
just there's a kind of yeah. I really like the that intention of kind of equalizing things that happens through meditation that allow it's not repression. It's not pushing things away or fighting them. It's allowing it to be there and opening up your judgment to them to be non-judgmental.
You're not repressing or expressing. And so people think, what else is there? If
Yeah.
it's not one of those two, then and I find this interesting. Do you know Abayagiri, the monastery in California?
Is
It's
that the, oh no, I don't know that one. No.
it's in the Thai forest monk tradition. Do you know Ajahn
Okay.
Chah?
Mm-mm. No, I'm not familiar.
Famous Thai monk who was Jack Kornfield's teacher back in like the
Okay.
80s, 70s or something. Really just wonderful teachings. There's a book called Food for the Heart, which is really worth just an amazing book. Basically a compilation of his teachings, but they have talks on their website, which I would highly recommend listening to. They're
Oh,
really, really
okay.
good. I visited a monastery there. There's a branch monastery in New Hampshire that's really that's amazing, worth a visit. One of the monks gave a talk at this monastery in New Hampshire, Temple Forest Monastery, and he was saying that part of the Buddha's genius was being able to see that there's something outside of birth and death. But how I
Mm.
don't that seems just astounding to me that you could see that, that you could see that there's up and down, so there must be something outside of up and down. There's light and dark, so there
Oh,
must be something
right.
outside of, but what? We can't even conceive of. And I think that he was referring to ultimate liberation, which would be out of the cycle of life and death, of continual rebirth and so forth.
Right, like everything, not everything is diametrically opposed, right? There's like other dimensions. This reminds me of one of my favorite little books. I was actually trying to get my 9-year-old to read it, but he doesn't feel ready for it. But it's the have you read Flatland? Um, so it's the
Yes,
story about
that's
the square
good.
that lives in
Yeah.
Flatland,
Yeah.
right? And like they describe how all the different two-dimensional shapes see each other, right? And it is a square character becomes privy to three-dimensional space but can't explain it to anybody. Like I remember he explains it as that he feels something reaching down to his center and nobody believes him. Right. And so just thinking about how we can understand the difference between two dimensions and three dimensions, which is also so related to the image object conversation we were having, right? That there is an other thing, and it's there's maybe not just one other thing, right? And we don't always have the language to articulate. We usually don't have the language to articulate it. Um, and I think that's what a lot of artists are doing, kind of working in there. Yeah.
Some years ago, I sat in an ayahuasca ceremony. I was doing some ayahuasca for a while, for a number of years.
Hmm.
I was doing a few ceremonies a year, and during one ceremony, I perceived this object. It reminded me of what Terence McKenna called the impossible object at the end of time, something like that.
Mm.
I knew that it was like a fourth dimensional object. I only knew that it was that, but I knew that
Hmm.
I also didn't have the apparatus to perceive it.
Hmm.
I could see it there, and I was trying to like look around it, but I was like, I don't have the equipment to look to actually perceive this thing. I know
Uh-huh.
there's something there from another dimension, just in the same way that the two-dimensional guy had the three-dimensional thing come down and he like
Uh-huh.
could feel it, but he couldn't perceive it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think similarly, like when I was 18, I had a very profound, intense experience on LSD. And and I think that experience really shaped so many of the ideas related to that we've been talking about in terms of there is something that's ungraspable by words and our regular communication. And for my relation, my experience was also similarly somehow related to geometry.
Mhm.
Like it sounded like yours was, you said there was an object of, or I don't know if it was geometric and
It seemed to be.
yeah. But yeah, I had this experience where I saw the reasoning for things in such a clear way, but had no way of telling anybody about it or explaining it. And even if I close my eyes now, I can kind of touch it a little bit. But that's all to say, don't do drugs. I really don't advocate for, I did a lot of some stupid things and it wasn't, necessarily healthy. But the experience, what was really like that time of my life as well, was incredibly formative in terms of how I saw the world and make assumptions about the world. And just the fact that we know nothing.
If you can break out of your conditioned experience, it really can reverberate in such a profound way in your life. In the same way that you can't really articulate those experiences, you can't explain a painting. You have to
Yeah.
experience it.
Yeah, right. And any explaining that happens, any writing, I do write quite a bit. Like, or I mean, not as much. I would like to write more. I don't want to overly pat myself on the back for that, but I enjoy writing. I find writing to be a very meaningful practice to me. And anything I say about my work or anyone else says about the work is just a part of the work. It's another component of the work. It's so the idea of to explain a work like that doesn't exist or something. Like that's not possible. It's an impossible endeavor. And it's actually one that I'm not that interested in. I love I love when people talk about the work and write about the work, and when I can write about the work and talk about the work, because those are just extensions of it.
So you would write about your own work, do you write other things too?
Yeah, I have in the past. Like I've been, I've written about other people's work. I used to kind of do more like creative nonfiction, like writing things, but like it's really more the writing that I do right now is really more about work, about art, or is academic
Or it's like
for
ideas
my
about your
job.
work, or you have to write. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
but I've been trying to write a little bit more, like just writing for myself. That's something I think in this upcoming uh time that I have to focus even more in the studio, I would like to write more.
I think certain things can and kind of enhance, if it's done correctly, it can kind of just like you were saying that Archschwager quote about a painting having handles.
Hmm.
I that changes your sort of experience of those paintings and you think about painting differently. I think it can enhance the experience or at least be a nice corollary to it. One of my favorite quotes, art quotes, is by Franz Klein, who said that painting is like hands in a mattress. And I really think, like I think about certain, I encountered it on an article. It was an article about Louise Fishman.
Okay. Wait, I
Uh,
don't get it. Hands in a
yeah,
mattress?
painting is like hands in a mattress. You know what I mean? Like it's like your hand is under the mattress and you're trying to get it out, kind of, and it's like kind of stuck there. It feels kind of good,
Oh,
and
okay.
you
Okay,
know what I mean?
sure.
And you're kind
Oh,
of like,
yeah, that's cool.
yeah.
No,
And I'm
I
like,
get it.
what?
Yeah.
That you think about his painting, and you think about like Abek's painting. It makes a lot of
Hmm.
sense. Like you're really
Hmm.
sort of
That's
in
cool.
this thing, and you're comfortable there, kind of. But I mean, painting itself is such a language unto itself,
Hmm.
isn't it? The way that you paint everything. I like that you really think about the architecture of your painting too, and having these ghost images and the stuff that comes through, the stuff that you even, I mean, everything in your life is everything is connected to what you're doing at any time.
Hmm.
I wonder if you could talk just for a minute about how you see past, present, and future in paintings.
Oh, my paintings?
Yeah.
Obviously, we're talking about my paintings. I didn't know if you meant
We
like
could talk about historical
painting
paintings too.
olive
We could talk
paintings.
any kind of paintings, sure.
Yeah, past, present, and future. Well, like in terms of anything.
Yeah, it sounds like you really think about like the energy that you put into it and it's still there latent in the painting and then you're working on it presently and then you're throwing that into the future in a sense.
Yeah. So when you say past, present, and future, do you mean we just had like a really heady talk? So I think like like, what do we mean by
Are we
time? No,
exploding?
but like, but yeah, I know I'm thinking
Did we
that.
explode? Yeah.
Yeah. But do you mean like the past, present, and future of, for example, a single painting? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the most annoying questions that I ask people too, because I'm curious because it's something that's ungraspable for me is how do you know when a painting is done? You know? And I feel like I've had experiences, the OIG show, for example. It was a really intense show to paint. I can't remember how many months I had to work on it. But it was really intense. I was in like I had this my father had died in the middle of me making these works, and it was just this really intense time in my life. And I was so proud of that show. I felt so it was breathtaking. Like when I saw it, it just it like makes your knees weak to see it up in a show in a way that was really lovingly curated and hung by Eric and the OIG people. But yeah, it was such a great milestone. And then when the work got all shipped back to me, I like had it in my studio and I was looking at it and I was like, oh no, like these all became undone. Most of these are undone. And so, in terms of thinking about the life cycle of a
So
painting,
you went back and worked on them after the show?
did I work on any of those? I think some of them, yes. A couple of them are actually still. I just posted a painting on Instagram that I think was one of those. It's unrecognizable. Um, but um, but yeah, it's like it's almost like my time and space between them, or between the time that I sent them off and the time they came back, I changed. Like I was in the process of a big change, just emotionally. Um, we're just always in flux, you know? So it came back, and the way that I met those, re-met and reunited with those paintings is that it was a new relationship. And so they felt unfinished to me in a way that they didn't feel unfinished when I shipped them off. And so that's interesting to me, not as a kind of pejorative, like, oh, well, you know, now I got to finish the paintings, but that it just made me really aware of how much we change and how the process of making art, the art is just always in flux.
And so
There
are
is no
you, right?
end. Yeah, and
Yeah.
so are we. And it's this, yeah, constant kind of shifting conditions. And that's not to say that like we shouldn't like put, sometimes you just have to put some stakes in the ground and be like, this is done, you know? And it's time, right? But I do like to think, you know, philosophically about this idea that a painting in terms of past, present, and future has has a lot of so much potential on either end, right? When we were thinking about talking about, you know, past experiences, childhood experiences, where one comes from, how that all of that gets siphoned into a painting in ways that we don't mean it to be. That's that kind of pastness of it, right? There's things that are just um, that are ingrained in us, right? That we can't really escape. We can question and interrogate as much as we want, but there are things that are kind of always there in the work, you know? I'm sure you have that experience. Like there's things in your work that you've just never been able to shake.
It's true. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
from the earliest time that it's still kind of there. Like the
Hmm.
things you were interested in as a child are still expressed in a way, and then things that it seems almost like it could almost predict things. Like I suppose the way that we see time is not really accurate in terms of what's actually happening. You know,
Hmm.
we see it like past, present, future in a linear way, but I think it's probably just one moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that the like paintings can, and I think a lot of the language we're using can also, you know, we're talking about like psychedelic trips and, you know, meditation. It can sound like otherly or something, or somehow like super mystical, but I don't think it is. I think it's really matter of fact. Like a painting, it's not even that I'm not even one who could make determinations about the painting. I'm not the sole author of it in a way, you know, and the way that you see a painting or the way that someone 20 years or 50 years from now will see the painting and think about the painting, they're just as much in charge of it in some ways, you know, or not in charge of it. You know, I don't know, or part of, you know, creating that the grounds in which it can speak. And so I like to think about the things that are outside of my control, right? Again, it's not that anything goes, right? The idea that a painting's never finished or it's not up to me isn't that I am not responsible or that I'm not, um, there's a lot of risk involved. There's a lot of, you know, courage that it takes, I think, to move through a work. Um, yeah, I'm gonna trail off again
It's
there.
really no, that's you've
Yeah,
given me that's a lot to think about. I mean,
yeah.
we don't quite fully appreciate that when somebody perceives it, when somebody looks at a painting, they really activate it. You know, so really the viewer is a collaborator in a really big
Hmm.
sense, and we really need it has to be done in a community. It's really kind of communication. And this leads me to my final question, which you don't have to
Hmm.
have a clear answer for this, but what do you hope that somebody might get from your work?
I don't think, is it, it may be that I don't know how to answer that question. It may be that the answer is I don't have any hope or expectation for anyone to get anything from the work. Um, it could be that it's not up to me to have hopes for another person to get from the work. There's something too controlling or authoritarian about that. Like, I think to go back to what I'm saying about the work being beyond us, it really has to do with, I don't believe in this kind of authoritarian, fixation on authorship and control of a work. I think it's free ultimately, and so are the viewers, and yeah, I have zero answer for you.
Wonderful, wonderful. I love
Okay.
that. I love that. That's perfect. And
Yeah.
I think that really reflects the openness with which you approach your studio practice in general.
Yeah.
You're open to ideas coming in, open to new ways of working, and I want to say that I get a lot of things out of like things that I've mentioned. Seeing your work, I get this sense of calmness or maybe flattening of a kind of hierarchy in a sense. And there's a lot of stuff embedded. And I think about the imagery that there's a lot of cultural influences and so forth. It's really nice that it is open, that I could come to it and get this from it, get my interpretation, and somebody else can have just, oh, I just like this color. I like these colors, I like this shape. What this reminds me of a dream I had or something. I think there's something really beautiful about the openness in your work.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Well, Mary, it's been a real treat talking.
Oh, me too. This was really, really wonderful.
So
Thank
good.
you.
So good.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on. Before we go, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I have got nothing to
Great.
add. It was lovely to talk to you.
Lovely.
And yeah.
Well, thanks again.